he basically told Robbie, like, Nick's got a good voice, you should try out Nick. And Robbie was like, I fucking hate that guy, like, I don't want to try him out. So he was like, come on, he's not that bad, like, give him a chance, whatever. And so he gave me a chance, and like we didn't even make it through like one of the songs, and he was like, all right, you got the voice, you're good. So
real quick before getting into today's episode, I just wanted to mention a few things. Gonna do this as quick as possible, I promise. First things first, we have a Discord server. If you're not already a part of it, it's the best place to get all the news and updates about the podcast, but it's also a thriving community of people just talking about MySpace, deathcore, metalcore, all the fun stuff. Also, we do these podcast recordings live on Twitch every single Wednesday, 6 p.m. EST. If you want the fully unedited, unfiltered versions of these, as well as being able to be a part of the conversation via Twitch chat, it's a fun time. Come check it out. Last thing I want to plug, we recently launched a Patreon. We finally did it. People have been asking us for a way to support the podcast, and this is our way to do so. So if you want behind the scenes posts, if you want to be the first to know about upcoming guests and events, if you want early access to episodes, if you don't want platform ads or no YouTube ads, stuff like that, Patreon is the way to do so. We also have a supporter-only Discord chat, as well as these group calls that Yan and I do every second Friday. So any of that interests you, or if you simply just want to support the podcast, I'll be leaving a link to the Patreon in the description below, as well as the Discord and the Twitch. So enough yapping. Thank you so much, and enjoy this episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Brutality podcast. My name is Dom, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Yan. And this week, we have the privilege of talking to a person whom I consider one of the GOATs. We have Nick Arthur from Molotov Solution. Welcome to the show, my man. How are you doing?
Hi, guys. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Of course. It's been
requested. It's been requested.
It's been requested indeed. Yeah, and like we were kind of talking about it ahead of the show too. Like, it's always cool when we get that mix of people that were there back in the day. We can kind of reminisce and talk about the history and the good old MySpace deathcore days, but also it's always a warm welcome when we have people still putting out music and doing some new stuff, and there's some new stuff to talk about. So, yeah, man, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, we got some new stuff for sure.
Oh yeah, so let's kind of dive into it, man. I was kind of digging back through the discography and some stuff online, and I was seeing a lot of misconceptions, and I don't know if you've felt this firsthand, but you actually joined the band on the second full length. You weren't on the self-title, and I think a lot of people are mistaken you for having been on the self-title as well. So I'd kind of love to dig back into that time and you joining the band, and if you knew the guys ahead of time, like how was it joining the band? Like what was kind of the origin story for you joining Molotov in the first place?
Okay, so there's a little bit of backstory to it. I'll try to make it brief, but I was kind of just like a local scene kid, hardcore kid, whatever, trying to start bands here and there, and nothing ever really working out, going to shows with friends. And I ended up joining another local Vegas band that was pretty well known and did really well in Vegas at the time, called Lynch Thy Beauty. Connects to Thy Art Is Murder in a very weird way. So joined that band, and the first tour that I did with that band was with Molotov Solution and Impending Doom and Elijah, whatever. Mm-hmm. And it was just like a little West Coast run that we did. I think it was something like 18 days. I was like 18 years old at the time. And I think all the guys in Molotov hated me, probably, except for the drummer. And yeah, probably just him. He probably was the only one that didn't hate me. A
reason for that?
I don't know. I was probably just a little asshole, straight edge, hardcore kid. But so basically after that tour, Lynch Thy Beauty broke up, dissolved. Molotov kind of absorbed the band and took the bass player and one of the guitar players. And quick note there, one of the other guitar players of that band, Lynch Thy Beauty, is now a pro UFC fighter named Khalil Roundtree.
Okay.
Back to the Molotov stuff. So they absorbed Sims and Kevin from Lynch Thy Beauty. And that was in 2006, I want to say, 2006, around the time the Split EP came out with War from a Harlot's Mouth. Yeah. And then shortly after that, I think it was in 2007, Molotov recorded the self-titled album. By the end of 2007, the band had kind of dissolved. So it was like before the album was even released. Mm-hmm. I was kind of in talks of joining the band in like the fall / like winter of 2007. Then that self-titled album was released around, I want to say around April 2008, but we started playing shows and doing things, I think like fall 2007, 2008.
So people just assumed from there, it was kind of like, he's
so
the new member. There's a new record afterwards. Like clearly he's the guy. Yep. and vocally sounded very different to the Split specifically as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Vocal style was very different. So I could understand why people would also assume from that.
Yep. And we did a lot of touring off the self-titled like pretty quick. We did like our first like national US tour. We made it all the way to the East Coast. And everyone, I think everyone just assumed it was me because I was singing with the band before the album was released, and then while the album was released and after the album was released. So we kept playing those songs really until we split. We would always kind of mix in like one or two per set, kind of keep it in there. But yeah, it's a funny misconception. I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't me, and they're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Even me, if I'm honest, I always assume in my mind ever since I always talk original with the band and everything. So I think there's a lot of people actually who thinks that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think when as a vocalist, when you're joining a band like an existing band, you really do want to cater to the fan base and try to sound like the singer did before you. And it's even using Vired as Murder, like when they got their new guy, you could hardly tell the difference on the record between him and CJ. Like they sounded so similar, which is really, really important. But I think over time, I really kind of came into my own and grew into myself, but really emulated a lot of my style and voice off of the original singer, Kyle.
Right. So you kind of had like the full length, the self-titled, and you're learning those songs and you're just kind of like, okay, let's sound like this. Right. Which I think further, adds to that sort of confusion. Cause then obviously then you guys do a record, you guys put out another record like a year later, and it's not like the vocal styles are wildly different. Like it sounds pretty damn close, right? One could assume, he just, kind of switched it up a bit, but his highs got better or something like that, but that's kind of like what you would come down to. But
you said, you kind of said jokingly that they hated you at first and stuff like that, but like, do you remember if joining the band and stuff like that, there was a little nervosity, like, joining these guys, or by that time everything was like completely fine and you kind of,
So one of my best friends, Jeremy, ended up taking over drums for Molotov around that time, and he wasn't involved with Lynch Thy Beauty or any of that. So he kind of just came in from the outfield and fit his way into the band. And him and I were actually working on like a separate side project that never saw the light of day. It's on MySpace somewhere, but we kind of stopped doing that when he joined Molotov. A lot of his focus got put into Molotov, obviously, because Molotov was working on trying to, be a national touring act at the time. And when they lost their singer, he told Robbie's the cornerstone member of Molotov, and he basically told Robbie, like, Nick's got a good voice, you should try out Nick. And Robbie was like, I fucking hate that guy, like I don't want to try him out. So he was like, come on, he's not that bad, like give him a chance, whatever. And so he gave me a chance, and like we didn't even make it through like one of the songs, and he was like, all right, you got the voice, you're good.
That's so funny now, knowing that's your main duo, right? Like the two of you have been doing everything together since then. So it is kind of funny to know that, the initially wasn't necessarily the case.
Yeah, and Robbie and I are still very, very good friends. I mean, he was like one of my groomsmen at my wedding a couple of years ago, and we're still super tight in that sense. But as with like any friendship or relationship, you kind of have your ups and downs. And I mean, there was even a point where Robbie left the band, and it wasn't on like the best terms. Like it was a pretty not great environment at the time, and that was 13, 14 years ago, whatever. But we're still friends, and now we're making more music today. So
that's insane, honestly. And I feel like people also need to understand, first of all, you're kids, like you're super young, stuff like that. Second of all, you spend way too much time together, all the freaking time. Even if, no, honestly, like even if you were with your very best friend in the world, you're gonna have confrontation. Stuff's gonna happen. I lived with my best friend, and I was just like, "What is happening?" Like it's just part of it. So like sometimes when people hear that, they're like, "Oh my god!" It was like, yeah, because touring first isn't easy. As much as like it's a dream for a lot of people, it's not like an easy life. Like to tour or play shows and stuff like that. You're always with the same people. So imagine if there's friction, and then you're the entire week with that person. Like you're next to that person. Like you're traveling with the person with who you don't have a break from these people. So I just wanted to add some context to that, because like it's fully understandable, on top of being kids and young, and let's be honest, stupid per moments. We were all, you know what I mean, like we said stuff or did stuff that you look back and you're like, what the hell, so just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and I think when we started touring too, the first tour that I did, Molotov had done some tours before this, but it was in 2006, and this was really before like you had Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever. We were printing off we were printing off MapQuest and stuff to do it that way. But we're sleeping next to each other, we're seeing each other naked more than we want to, we're saving each other's lives from fights or whatever it is. Like there's a lot of history there. So yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy probably when you look back though, now that these people, you know what I mean, like you were talking about the wedding and stuff like that. It kind of, even if back then, you know what I mean, like it was maybe per moment negative or toxic, when you look back, it makes it even more special probably to be with these dudes, still now, and think about, all of it's part of the lore and probably part of what, gets you close over time. So that's very special in a way.
Yeah, it's always like, I don't want to say like the grass is greener, but you kind of have like the rose colored glasses when you look back on those times. It's like, man, I miss those times. It's like I'm married now, but before I was married, you would think of like an ex-girlfriend and be like, oh, I miss her. But then you don't really miss like all the shit that comes along with it. So you're kind of looking back with these like rose colored glasses, and it's like those times were so great back then. And like, of course, like if I could go back, I would love to go back and just relive all that stuff again. But it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, there was some rough times and there were some great times, but it's always like, I'm glad it all happened regardless,
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
You guys kind of tying into, I guess, morphing yourself to the self-titled a bit and kind of continuing on what the band already had. I feel like the self-titled itself was so different material-wise than anything the band had put out previously, but that did become like the sound that Molotov kind of, stayed, moving forward. Like that kind of became like the quote unquote new sound that the band had. And I'm just curious because even lyrically, I guess, the band has always been super politically driven, right? And but that's something you kind of came into, and the band was already like that. But what was kind of the approach there? Was that just something you were super aligned with from the beginning, and that's kind of why it worked, or was that something you were trying out because that's what the band was already doing? I'm curious, like how politics comes into Molotov, because that's always been like such a big piece to the band, right?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, continued along with it because it was something the band was already doing. But long answer, growing up in Vegas and being a fan of Molotov before actually being in the band, having other bands like Misericordium who are also like very heavily political, you kind of just adapted your own personal political worldview around kind of the information that you were getting from those guys. And then, doing your own research and kind of figuring things out. By the time that I joined the band, I was kind of already down my 9/11 was an inside job rabbit hole and started kind of doing all that type of stuff. And so it wasn't like a hard transition for me to be like, I have to become this person now, like I already was.
Because they had the shirts, right? Like the 9/11 inside job stuff. You couldn't really shy away from it if you weren't on board with that, right?
Right. And there was, it's a conspiracy theory or conspiracy fact or however you want to refer to it. It's always going to be contentious, and there's going to be people that are really strongly opposed to ideas that differ from what they hold inside. And so there was, issues with having a political message. There still is. And it's especially nowadays where things are so polarized, it's really tough to kind of have a worldview that is your own, that doesn't piss everybody else off.
It's for sure going to offend someone. For
sure.
Right. And I think one of the bigger problems with that today is that people just assume that you need to share their opinion on everything. To go off the deep end right away, it's like, if you don't think women should be able to get abortions, you're a bad guy to somebody that thinks women should be able to get abortions. And so that's the extreme idea. That's one of the most contentious things in politics today. But it's like, you're not a politician. You're not enforcing that worldview. That's just your worldview. It could be based in religion. It could be rooted in so many different things. But as soon as you have a different opinion from somebody, they immediately want to unfriend you, unfollow you. And you could share your worldview could be nearly identical, but you could just be like, I don't think women should be able to have abortions. And then it's like, whatever. That's the extreme. Sorry. I don't think women shouldn't be able to have abortions or anything like that. But I'm just saying, it's tough, and kind of taking over that duty of being this politically charged band. It was hard, even though I was already kind of on my path through that. It's harder now than it was then, but I kind of added a little bit of my worldview to it at the time, which is more about it, the institution of religion. And Molotov didn't really have a lot of that religious context before me. And so I kind of brought that in with the Harbinger, continued alongside Insurrection, and then with the new stuff, there's a lot of tones there too. Yeah,
which was kind of the moment, at least from memory. I don't know if you remember how you felt personally, but with the Harbinger, with that release, it really felt like the band was 50 billion times bigger or something. I don't know if it's just from an outside, but how I remember is just oh my god, that was the record. Do you remember just realizing oh my god, okay, I think guys, it's we're picking up freaking traction at the moment.
I think it was kind of building before that, because when Molotov was releasing the self-titled, or when Molotov had written the self-titled before it was released, it had a lot of attention from other labels, and other labels, specifically Metal Blade, wanted to release the self-titled album, but they were getting a lot of pushback from the record label that they were on, which was 12 Gauge. I don't know all the details about that because it wasn't my album and I wasn't there for the negotiations or dealing with any of that drama. But to my understanding, 12 Gauge didn't want to let the record go, which hurt the band, I guess, because if Molotov could have released that on Metal Blade, it probably would have done much better. However, they lost members. They had to rebuild anyway, so I don't know. But once we signed with Metal Blade and did the Harbinger, I do feel like it was definitely a step up for the band for sure. And it was also a transition in the scene from being around deathcore's MySpace and founding days to deathcore becoming a genre, and really bands like Oceano, Impending Doom, Whitechapel, blah 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 blah, all the bands in that same vein really started to hone and craft deathcore into what it was. And you could really start calling things deathcore. I think before that, in between around that time, the late 2000s, there was kind of this lingering stigma against using deathcore as like an actual genre. And I think around that time, like 2009, it was finally like broken. Deathcore was a thing.
Right. Like you're touring with like Suicide Silence, No Time to Bleed, 2009. Yeah. It's okay to be deathcore now.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like it's like it's chill.
Yeah.
But I can imagine, especially from being also from the context of the band being around since like 2004, you know, and deathcore wasn't a thing, and kind of transitioning their sound over time, because they didn't always sound like a deathcore band. So I'm sure there must have, even just from that perspective, been some sort of well, are we deathcore? Is this what you would really consider like, you know, there's like a point in the band where it's like, when does it switch, you know?
Yeah. And I think for a while there was like a negative stigma on deathcore, and it was like, when you were called deathcore, you're like, we're not deathcore, like deathcore sucks. I don't like, you know, like you don't want to be called deathcore. And then for a while, I think people were trying to like navigate around that. Like, we're heavy metal, you know, like nobody wanted to really like own that title. And it got to a point where, I don't know, it must have been like 2016. I was doing one of the tours that I did with Art, and we were in Europe, and we were in like Oslo, Norway, in the black metal church where like, it was where like Mayhem started, or whatever black metal band from there. Someone's going to punish me online for not knowing. But it's like this black metal church. It was like from Lords of Mayhem. It had to be Mayhem because it's called Lords of Mayhem. But where they like founded that band, you can go in there now. It's like a record store, and they have like a bunch of like old merch and shirts and vinyls and, you know, all that stuff. And you can still go down to where their like little lair was, where they would like party and, I don't know, do whatever. And there's like a book, like a guest book, and you can sign your name in the guest book, you know, when you go and visit. And I just wrote #long live deathcore. And I knew somebody was going to see it and like blow a head gasket. But yeah, I mean, it's deathcore is deathcore now. Nobody's afraid of it. Nobody wants, like, people are trying to be more deathcore. I mean, look at Whitechapel's new stuff. So there's no shame in the game anymore.
Just a quick second to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Indie Merch Store. Indie Merch Store is your #1 spot for officially licensed metal band merch. And today we're talking a lot about Molotov Solution. We're talking about Art is Murder as well. They both have a ton of merch on sale right now on the website. Molotov Solution, with the new singles that they put out over the last few months, they restocked a bunch of brand new merch with the new logo and all that fun stuff. And Art is Murder actually just recently restocked a whole bunch of fan favorite designs as of last week. So if you guys want to check that out, you guys can use code Brutality for 10% off at checkout. Help support the show and helps you guys save a little bit of money. So yeah, thank you so much to Indie Merch Store for sponsoring this episode. And now back to the show.
I'm curious about something else too, not to jump ahead, but like you guys toured with all the biggest, like from memory of what I've seen. Your name was basically, Molotov Solution was everywhere. Like every time I would see like a tour, something sick or whatever, you guys were there. Do you remember, if I'm guessing you had a lot of friends in the scene, but do you remember like specifically in those early days, if you had like bands that like really were close friends type thing? We hear that a lot, you know, those guys were kind of
who was in your top 8?
Yeah, type thing, you know.
Top 8 would be, I think,
you don't gotta give 8, but
Doom would probably be at the top, I think. So that first tour that I did with Impending Doom and Molotov, I was 18, and Brooke Reeves was also 18, and everyone else was 16. And Lynch Thy Beauty and Impending Doom were in a van together. And me and Brooke were 18 years old, and then the rest of the people in the two bands were 16. And then beyond that, like Molotov did a bunch of tours with Impending Doom, and Impending Doom was always in and out of Vegas and whatnot. So I think Impending Doom would very much be at the top. I think Misericordium, even though there was like beef in and out of the Las Vegas scene with Molotov and Misericordium and stuff, I would have to say that even though it was like, it would be like best friends fighting kind of a thing now. Yeah. So I think I would definitely throw Misericordium.
There was a drummer in the band at some point, right? Am I crazy?
In Misericordium?
Yeah, in Molotov.
Yeah, Matt Mancuso. He played in both, I think, for a short while. I think that Whitechapel is like Big Brother band. like was like big brother band for us at the time. So I would have to throw them in there. Oceano 100%. Like those were our boys. They stayed with Robbie for a while, like maybe shortly after Deaths came out while we were writing The Harbinger.
Oh.
And we just like hung out with those guys a bunch. Every time they came to town, they were like best friends. We did 2 tours with 2 other bands that were like, I mean, they're like lifelong friends, which is Dr. Acula and Avocab.
Ooh.
Yeah. A lot of fun on those tours from what you were telling me.
Yeah, you know, we just clicked like right away, and everybody was just like the best and worst version of themselves possible, and we just like partied and talked shit nonstop. Like it was just like there were dicks everywhere. Like everybody was just kind of, I don't know, crazy and young and, you know, having a blast. I don't know. I mean, there's definitely more bands. I think Thy Art now, I think for an Autopsy now. But I don't know. Back then's kind of tough.
Yeah, I mean that's
for what it's worth, it's a good answer. Like you probably gave us
representation or whatever.
Yeah. You gave us like a real good answer, and it's cool to have perspective. You know, you were mentioning, you know, Debs, Oceano. We're big fans of that era, obviously, but like they shook the entire scene. You know, not to talk too much about Oceano or whatever, but like when Debs dropped, like I feel like it shook everybody. Like it was just like, oh, deathcore can be like that intense and heavy with like Adam's vocal. I remember thinking like this has to, my first thought was just like, is that Excels even? Like what is that? Like it's incredible. So it's insane to know that you guys were were basically homies with them and you were writing your freaking album. It's insane. It's cool to, you know, it's cool to
know. Another like, I don't want to say honorable mention because these guys I'm still super close to too, but they actually did some shows, some small touring with Molotov before I was in the band. And then I've toured with them several times with Molotov and with Thy Art, but also Carnifex. They did some stuff with Molotov before I was in Molotov, and Scott likes to ask me all the time, like, do you remember this show? And I'm like, no, I wasn't there. I wasn't in the band. I mean,
Scott's actually the one telling everyone you're on the self-titled.
Yeah, probably. He's the one propagating that rumor. He also likes to propagate another rumor about, I think it's Demon Hunter, where like they were playing Vegas with Demon Hunter, and there was nobody on the guest list that night but me. It was supposed to be like a tour kickoff. Whitechapel was also supposed to be on the tour, I think, and they weren't playing Vegas because, I don't know, for some reason they weren't playing Vegas. But anyways, I was the only person on the guest list that night. And apparently somebody backstage asked the singer of Demon Hunter for a picture, and they got their guest list revoked for the entire tour because there was only one person on the guest list, and they automatically assumed that it was the only person on the guest list that asked for the picture, which was me. But I don't even like Demon Hunter. I definitely didn't ask for a picture, and Scott just like will not let me live it down. He's like, every time I see him, he's like, you got our guest list revoked for that entire tour. I'm like, it wasn't me. I didn't do anything.
Hey, I mean, if no one sees the picture, it didn't happen.
Dude, I wish it was me at this point. Like, I wish I did it and I had the picture and I could use it to like roast them back.
Wow. Shout out, Scott. That's freaking funny. Wow.
Yeah.
You speaking on the Harbinger as well, you guys recorded. I mean, look, maybe this is a contentious topic, but given more recent stuff, but you guys recorded with Tim Lambesis, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How was that for? I'm just curious specifically for you because I'm going back in time. I'm thinking like 2008, As I Lay Dying is like peak. You know, you're like the new guy coming into Molotov. You're doing this first album with them, and you're recording with Tim Lambesis. Like, was that awesome? Was that like intimidating? Was that weird? Like, how'd that experience go?
It was definitely a little intimidating. I'm not typically like a fanboy. Like, I don't get super like excited to meet people. I get a little shy and a little nervous, so I'll kind of clam up a little bit, but I don't. Like, I'm not fully myself, but I'm not like, oh my God, Tim Lambesis, like I gotta get this up, like nothing like that. But
there still must be some sort of like, it is kind of like a big deal, right? Just to
Oh,
versus going to
huge.
the local homie recording studio, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was his house. It wasn't like his house that he lived in, but he had a home studio down in San Diego. And Tim Lambesis is like one of the main reasons I got into doing vocals. I would say probably like Tim Lambesis, Matt Brusso from Bury Your Dead, and maybe like Vincent from the Acacia Strain were probably my three favorite vocalists. And that really got me into like really wanting to sing. So going there was pretty crazy. Like getting to record with As I Lay Dying at one point was my favorite band. Like when I was in high school, As I Lay Dying was my favorite band. And just a few years removed from high school, like getting to go and record with him at his house. And he was so, nice, friendly, humble. He's like, how do you get your voice to do that? Ooh, like, like really like trying to go really low. And obviously he figured it out now, but it was great. I've actually stayed relatively in touch with Tim, like after he got out of jail or prison, whatever you want to call it. But, since all the recent stuff has happened, I think a lot of things have gone dark. I'm not really an apologist or anything, but, Tim was always a great guy to me. Everything else, in the news kind of sucks, but it is what it is. It doesn't tarnish that part of any of it for me.
No, it doesn't take away from like you guys' memory and what what you experienced or whatever, like it's still your.
And I think like for me, it's also easy to separate the art from the artist, where like people are like, I can't listen to R. Kelly anymore, or I don't like Drake anymore. I'm like, I believe I can fly. No, I'm just kidding. But
no, but I
still love As I Lay Dying. Yeah.
And because it was weird, because he was kind of like on a deathcore kick for a minute. Like most of the records he produced were like Carnifex, Impending Doom, like that, you guys, like that sort of stuff. Like there was like a time where that's mostly what he was doing.
Yeah, when we did Harbinger, we came into the studio right after Impending Doom left. And I remember like coming in and everything was like a mess. They like didn't clean up any of their shit. Right? I remember we were just hating on them so bad because they were just like they're like little kids, they're like not even. I was like 21 when we recorded. When we were 20, I was like 21 or 22 when we recorded Harbinger. But it was just like these kids, they're like 19, 20 years old, and they're just like I remember going in being like, okay, we can't leave the house like this. Like this isn't our house. Whatever.
It's either one of the two. Like, okay, this is the expectation of what can be done, or no, let's not do this.
We did our best to like leave our best mark there and try to be as serious and professional as we could be. But it was the first time I recorded songs in the past, but it was my first time recording a full length album. So that was all in all was a crazy experience. While we were in the studio, the New York hardcore band Sworn Enemy was also in there.
Right. They were doing stuff with them too. Yeah. They did a few records with them.
Yeah. It was, we shared the studio space with them for a while. It was crazy. It was really cool meeting those guys and hanging out with them. It's so far removed now, but yeah, nuts. Like crazy.
Yeah. Cause those guys are legends too in their own right. So it's like,
I'm pretty sure
Misery it's a pretty crazy room to be in.
Oh, absolutely. I'm pretty sure Misericordium went into the studio like shortly after we did with Tim Lambesis, and they recorded an album, and I don't know if it ever got finished. Definitely never got put out, but I don't know if it ever got finished. Somewhere on the shelf.
And they're re-putting out a bunch of old material, but I haven't seen that one float around. That's something we gotta dig up from the archives.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll ever see it, but I do hope they figure it out someday.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I don't know about you. I would like to know how you feel about it, but like the sound of on that record that you recorded, like still today to me really holds up. Like the production on that, like I still, I still think it's kind of, I call it like timeless. You know what I mean? Like it's not. There were no like back in the days, people would try sometimes to be a little more gimmicky or try stuff or whatever that doesn't really translate or age well, whatever, but like you listen to it now, still, in my opinion, I don't know if how you personally feel about that, but I feel like it still holds up.
I have like a love-hate relationship with both the Harbinger and Insurrection. And it's like it's just because it's like you're your own biggest critic, right? And so I was just not prepared when we recorded The Harbinger, and I hear a lot of things that a lot of people don't, and I'm like, I wish I would have done this, I wish I would have done this, I wish I could have done this better, like so that record especially for me, but I do look back on it with a lot of love. A lot of those songs are really well written, and a few of them I'm like, I wish we could have done this or that, but it's hard. I don't want to be hypercritical of it at the time, because it was like a lot of people really love that album. A lot of my close friends really love that album, and I'm like, oh, Insurrection is like a way better album. But it's just hard to, like, in my eyes, Insurrection has a better performance, but I think The Harbinger gets more love in a sense that way. I don't know. It's hard to say for me. It's hard for me to look at it like subjectively, because all I do is hear myself, and
you have everything. You have the context, you have all the, you as a, in your progression, your ideas.
Because hindsight is 2020 also, right? You're like looking back on something being, I could do this better now. Yeah, but it wasn't now.
Exactly.
It was back then.
And I think too, like with the new material that we did with Putney, there was a lot of stuff that I wanted to do in Insurrection that even some of the guys in the band were like, I don't think we should do that. That doesn't sound like a good idea. And it would have been like ahead of its time had we done it back in 2011 versus now. But I think that the way things progressed, it was like, oh man, I wanted to do that back then. We ended up doing it now. Now it sounds like everybody else, we could have been really the ones that Insurrection has a lot of critical acclaim and being kind of like a cornerstone album for deathcore too, and kind of transitioning the genre kind of away from that earlier, or that the late 2000s sound. But I think that hindsight is always 2020, and it's like, man, I wish we could have done this. I wish we could have done this. But you just got to do it when you can do it. If that's like, if anybody's listening, like wants advice on, don't be afraid to try new stuff. Don't be afraid to test yourself or see what you can do, because you won't regret it later on.
Yeah, what was cool also, I feel like for a lot of people, is you were seen as like one of the first like really powerful lows, and like it sounds super powerful. Like you would hear a lot of like, I don't know, like people doing guturals, you could hear it, it's more of an effect or whatever, but on your voice it was just like, holy shit, like it sounded like angry. And so, which I understand now that you're saying that Acacia Strain was like an influence, all that stuff, but like I feel like maybe that album was also gave like a perspective on like a special kind of deathcore too, like a really powerful, pissed off, angry, and I would even argue that it was a bit ahead of its time, because you would see that a lot over time. Like afterwards you would see some bands going in that direction. So I just wanted to also specify that it was also kind of an innovation in that way, at least from an outside perspective.
Yeah, I think so. I recently did my first ever vocal lesson, and I'm trying to start doing more of them. So if anybody listening wants a vocal lesson, definitely message me. I haven't started charging people yet, so get in now while it's free or cheap.
Some DMs.
but basically, like I think the most important thing for me as a vocalist, there's really two things, and one is kind of clarity. It's like, what are you singing for if people can't understand you? And B, which doesn't always fit into like death metal or deathcore or even metal for that matter genre, but if I'm saying something, I want it to be heard, I want it to be understood, and otherwise I don't feel like I should be holding a microphone. And then B is emotion, and I think tying in something that you want to say passionately and pushing that emotion through is you can do your kind of vocal Olympics with your little lows and your little highs and your tongue tricks and whatever. But for me, it was always about like as punk rock or as hardcore as it could be, is like just grabbing the mic and just yelling into it. And so what I did is I kind of took that approach, but then I tried crafting a sound around that. So it was always about conveying emotion. Like even one of the videos that you shared when you announced me being on the podcast was, I think the first clip, it's like me screaming the lyrics for Awakening, and it's like, I'm not being kind to that microphone. No. Like I'm putting every ounce of my soul into it. Like, so that was kind of my my like avenue or my like path in vocals, and it's been something that I've toyed with and played with, and it's been a little while since I've done a show, but would like to think that it would still be there. So yeah,
was
that aggression is something that I was just going to say that aggression is something that I try to channel into the recording specifically, but it also makes it really hard. And like I was saying, when you kind of hindsight is 2020, I wish I would have done this better. I wish I would have done that better. When you're pushing as hard as I do into a microphone, it's hard to like do an entire line perfectly. So
and then do it live. Yeah.
and then also do it live. And if you listen to like Molotov songs, it's like vocal assault. There's not a lot of breaks. And so I would, kind of shoot myself in the foot a few times here and there, but I think we figured it out pretty good with the new songs.
That's like a part of the sound at a certain point. That's just kind of like what kind of makes it, right? What makes it different, what makes it unique. So, and
the vocal, I did vocal one takes for the first 2 songs that we released. I wanted to do one for the third one, but just
it sounds fucking great.
Didn't get around to it, but it was hard. Like when I went in to record the vocal one take for Devour the Children, we went in, me and Robbie went into the studio with our buddy Josh, who used to play in Distinguisher and runs Nevermore Recordings out here. We went into the studio and turned the music on, started tracking the song, and like in like the first or second line, I just kind of like gassed out, and I was like, maybe I'm not like ready for this. And we took a couple weeks and I practiced super hard, and then finally came back to it when it was able to get it, but I was like out of shape, not prepared, and
it's all reps, dude. Though you know it from having toured, right? Like you know how it is after touring, like how everything is easy at that point, right? You just kind of get into. Is that the Robbie in chat right now?
No, that's not the Robbie. That's my other buddy.
Another Robbie.
Okay. The mustache does add reverb. Yeah. No, it definitely is all about reps, and it took me a little while, but then was able to kind of knock them out and kind of get back into shape. But I think I'm probably like back out of shape now. I do want to do some more vocal playthroughs, but it takes a little while.
It's hard if you don't have like specific shows to get to, or if you don't know you're going back into the studio right away or whatever.
Yeah. Once you've done a tour, once you've done like 30 days or 40 days on a tour, and your voice becomes like a machine, and it becomes super easy. So that was with Insurrection. We planned it that way specifically, with like different from Harbinger. It was like we were just at home writing music for I don't know, like maybe 3 months. We didn't really play any shows. We maybe played one show here or there, but like not a whole lot of stuff. And then just went to the studio, and my voice just wasn't like 100%. Blew it out pretty early on in the recording process and had to come back. And then with Insurrection, we did a month-long tour all the way to the studio
to Jersey.
It was just in like perfect shape for that. So I like the difference between Harbinger and Insurrection, I think, is that I look at Insurrection as like you were more prepared for this record than you were for Harbinger.
Okay, that was my next question. By the way, I was like, was that a problem on tour to keep that powerful voice? You know what I mean? Like at every show that you kind of inserted saying like it was a machine and it was working, but I was curious to know if you had any problems with that sometimes.
The only time I really ever had problems, I think we did a good job like rehearsing and practicing before tours would start. The only time I would really have a problem is when I would get sick. And when you would get sick on tour, especially like in the winter, for me, there was no recovery. And there were points where I would just do vocal rest for like, there was one time where I didn't speak for like 8 days or more, like 11 days or something like that, because my voice was so bad that I could basically only do our set, and then I would have to just be quiet and not speak the rest of the time, like complete vocal rest, because I was sick. And if I did anything else, try to hang out in a venue where bands are playing and you can't talk at a normal volume. You have to yell.
You can say it. You didn't want to go sell the merch. It's okay.
No, you know what? Merch was great because that was a good source of income. You'd get some tips and stuff, and eat some extra food. But no, it was that was probably it. I think was getting sick on tour was the worst part. When I
that's
toured with
inevitable.
IR, I was out of practice, to say the least. Like when I toured with them early 2016, and I didn't know all their songs. I wasn't very comfortable with it. I barely knew those guys, and I flew out to Germany to tour with them. And I was so afraid I was going to blow my voice out or lose my voice, and it was easy. Second tour I did with them was even easier because I knew them at that point. I was familiar with the songs. It was great. And then when I toured with them in 2019 with Architects,
again,
they were using in-ear setups for the first time that I had used them. I guess since I was singing with them, we just had like live sets before. And so I had these like stock in-ears, and they wouldn't stay in my ears. And then there was zero stage sound.
Because
and so I completely blew my voice out the first night, and it was like a pretty long set that we played. Blew my voice out. Had like the hardest time then recovering the rest of the tour, but it was like, okay, it was like manageable. But the entire time that I toured with them, then it was just like, it was the worst, because it was like struggling with like my voice being jacked up from the first show and trying to recover while playing more shows, and then not being able to hear myself and with shitty in-ears. So it was brutal.
Yeah. And then probably you're probably, you know, doing vocal rest and all this stuff, but you're like out on tour so not often at that point.
Yeah.
You're seeing your boys again. You probably want to enjoy the moment, but you're like fucking stuck on vocal rest type thing.
No, absolutely. I don't think I did any vocal rest. I think I just was like, like, you know, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, oh well, you know.
Well, it's one of those things that people sometimes don't think about. Like if you're, you know, I'm not saying it's easier, but like if you play guitar and you're sick, you can play guitar. It's going to suck. You're going to be tired, but you can play guitar, but it's your freaking voice. Like everything affects it. So, and the problem is people don't have the context. So if it doesn't sound good live, people are just thinking he sounds bad live. Like they're not like, oh, he's probably sick, or they're just like, oh my God, I saw them and he's not. So you have all that pressure of just like, fuck,
this dude filling in for the IR really fucking sucks.
They're
just like, what's happening, you know?
Because they were gonna say that either way, right?
It makes me think about that. I don't know if you guys have seen that video. It's of Chelsea Grin. They're actually in Las Vegas.
Dude, did you see the comments? Like they were asking, what is he saying? And someone said, welcome to Jurassic Park. It killed me. Like killed me. Like I cannot unhear that anymore. Like every time I hear the video, I'm like, oh.
He kind of sounds like a dinosaur too, but no, shout out that Chelsea Grin, past and present Chelsea Grin. Love both lineups of those guys so much. But that was in Vegas. Iconic video. And I can tell you what he was saying. It was in Vegas, and he was saying, welcome to Rock the Block.
Wow. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Man, yeah, and he's, you know, he knows and he's laughing about it. You know what I mean? Like I talked a few times, he's like totally fine with it, but the video it's perfect, you know, like how it's captured, the video quality, like everything about it is just like insane. I love talking about these things because now people get context. You don't think about these things sometimes. You just think like sometimes a show can be completely fucked up just because the sound just, you know, when the person like doing the sound or whatever kind of fucked up. So people, they don't think, oh, maybe the person in charge, they just think like, oh my God, that band doesn't sound good.
To their point, sometimes bands just fucking suck.
Oh, there's that. No. I'm not defending every band on the planet. But you know, I just mean there's so many things that can, you know what I mean? Like people sometimes forget that this band just played like 200 freaking shows in a row. So of course, sometimes like the vocalist might not sound, you know, perfect, but for that person in the crowd, it's their time in the year that they see them. So it's this whole thing. So
there was one night when I think it was like on the second tour that I did with Die Art, where we partied very hard the night before, and to the point where like I couldn't sit up straight until like maybe 10 minutes before we were supposed to start our set. It was that bad. And I mean, on this tour, there was also many nights where I went on stage pretty much blackout drunk, wouldn't remember the words to the first song. We partied very hard on this tour, but This specific night was in Poland, and it was freezing cold. I was like not wearing a shirt, just laying on cold concrete, just trying to like revitalize myself any way I could. I jumped in the shower right before we started, walked on stage, and had just like zero energy. It was just like a walking corpse on stage. Meanwhile, Marshy was like blackout drunk this night. Like, I love you, man. I'm so happy, we're across the world and we get to do this together. And he's like hugging me and like bumping me with his guitar and trying to push me off stage and just like wasted. Meanwhile, I'm like, I can barely stand up and I'm trying to like sing this band's songs. Insane.
Wow.
People in Poland were probably like, this guy is a fucking asshole. This band sucks.
How were the? I mean, how do you get that initial call to do it the first time? Did you Thyart? Because I know it was like some of it was last minute, some of it wasn't. Like, what was the initial link up with Thyart? Had you toured with them previously? No, right?
No, we played a show with them randomly in New Jersey on a tour that we were on. I think they were in the studio with Will Putney, and they jumped on the show and played with us.
Right. They played like I think they played like 3 shows like around there while they were in the studio. Yeah.
Maybe. And we like, shook hands with them, met them, but didn't really like talk much or like, get to know them or anything. And then they came to Vegas for Extreme Thing one year. And I think some of the members from Molotov had actually joined Fit for an Autopsy, and they were like, Thyart's here. They want to like hang out with you. And they like got me backstage, and I hung out with them a little bit that day, but still like didn't really talk much, didn't get to know them like a ton either. And then, just I guess a few months later, maybe a year later, whatever it was, Marshy like DM'd me on Facebook and he was like, hi. And I'm like, hello. And he's like, I can't even remember. Like, I'm sure I could scroll back through our conversation, but it was like, are you busy in December? It was like, just like such an odd conversation. Yeah. And I was like, and eventually he was like, we don't have a singer. Do you want to sing for us? And I was like, sure. And just ended up working out that I was on like a work trip in Florida at the time. And I basically with like, it was like not even 3 weeks notice, got on a plane and flew to Germany and started that with them.
Right. Cause it wasn't even like it wasn't a location based thing. It wasn't like, hey, we need someone for the US, cause you were flying out for a Euro.
Yeah. I don't know if I was their first choice. I think Marshy would probably tell you I was, but I don't know if that's, I'll take his word for it and say that I was their first choice, but who knows?
Well, most people are busy, right? Like I think to me, the way I saw it was kind of like, hey, this guy's not doing Molotov anymore, right?
Yeah,
like so you're like you're freed up. Whereas most people have got they're touring, they're writing records, they're doing these other things. So someone who has touring experience and knows how it goes. And the touring experience is everything for those kids. Like Thyart didn't want to pick some random nobody that's never toured before to go do their Euro with Parkway Drive and Architects, And
at this point too, you have a track record, you've been on tour, you can last through a tour, you have recorded songs. I think that makes it easy.
And small of people that can do it.
I don't want to go into it, but I've also been asked to sing for just about every notable deathcore band that lost a singer somewhere along the way. So you could take your pick, but with Thyart, it was like, if I wanted to join and tour full time in a deathcore band, it would have been with Thyart. Like I love those guys all so much. And after just doing like the first tour that I did with them, I was like, it makes it really hard for me to not want to be in a band with you guys, but I really just don't want to tour full time. But I ended up basically flying out from Florida to Germany, not really knowing these guys, like have met them a couple times, but like don't know them.
Yeah.
Land at like 3 or 4 a.m. in Germany. Don't know where anything is, where I'm going. I'm meeting their tour manager at the airport. He's German. Finally find him, get picked up by him. He takes me to like the hostel or hotel that they're staying at, and they're all in one room. So it was a room like not much bigger than I'm in probably like a 10 by 12 room right now, 10
Okay.
foot by 12 foot room right now. And it probably wasn't much bigger than this, but there were like bunk beds and like beds next to each other, and everyone's asleep. It's still dark outside. And Chris is like, go lay over there by Sean. That's your spot in bed. And it was literally like a queen size bed with like an already, Sean's a big guy. He's like 6'2", maybe, like big dude, 200 pounds, probably 200 pounds or a little under.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay. And I have like my headphones in and I'm like listening to their songs and I'm like trying to not disturb Sean and still trying to like, like drill these things into my brain so that I don't screw them up, because in like 2 days we're playing a sold out show to 4,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just insane. Like, I don't want to call it a nightmare, but like very surreal moment, even for somebody that had toured like as extensively as I had, just kind of showing up, not knowing anybody, having to rip through these songs. And then immediately starting off, first show was like 4,000 people. Second show was like 6,000 people. Yeah, it was insane. Parkway Drive tour, like wild. Anyway.
Parkway Drive. Yeah. I love, Parkway Drive was killing it. You know what I mean? Like, we keep talking about that era of just like heavy metalcore, but like awesome. And Parkway Drive is up there to me. Like, I mean, like still now I listen to these records from back then. They were, and especially live, don't want to talk too much about them, but like, just seeing them perform and seeing, the vocalist Winston, like he has a smile the entire time. They're running across stage and stuff. Like, one of the best bands I've seen, energy wise and vibe and everything live. They're crazy. It's been a while since last time I saw them live, but they were just like freaking killing it. I just wanted to say it.
I have to say, so that tour was Parkway Drive, Architects, Thy Art Is Murder, and it was all insane lineup. It was all Australians and all British people, basically. There were a few one-offs here and there, like Chris was German, I was American, Chops, the guitar tech for Thy Art was American. Him and I were the only two Americans on the entire tour. Mm-hmm. And so it was very much like a out of my element, but like kind of loving every minute of it. I like click super hard with Australian people anyway, so it made it even easier for me to sing with Thy Art. But all we did all day on that tour was play ping pong. And it was the Thy Art guys and the Parkway Drive guys. And all we did all day long, just table tennis, ping pong, back and forth all day, like aggressive. Like most people that don't play ping pong would look at it and go, holy shit, these guys are like professional ping pong players. We would have like heated games, and they were just so chill. My sleep paralysis demon, but they were just like so chill, so like easy going, and you wouldn't expect it because they're just in like one of the biggest metal bands on the planet Earth, and they're just the nicest guys. Love to like shit, like no diva shit. Like we'd all go out for drinks afterward. Everyone was just very, very cool, super laid back. It was awesome.
That's the vibe too, like that's kind of what you want. Also, you keep great memories and stuff like that, because you mentioned earlier, you said like everybody in that band hated me and stuff like that. Like there was a moment in time, no, for real, that like it was kind of, there was a lot of like, I'm cool type of guy, and this, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not talking to this band or that person or whatever, like kind of that attitude, which is great, because today, honestly, you don't hear a lot of that. Like, I mean, we do that every single week, and quite honestly, we don't hear that much. It feels like people feel more together type thing than back then, so
I think everybody kind of had a chip on their shoulder back then, and everybody felt like it was more of a competition. But it's like we can all eat, so might as well just have the camaraderie and have the good times and try to enjoy it, because being on the road isn't easy, and it's not for everybody. And if you're one of the guys that like makes it shittier or harder on people to be on the road, like, fuck you. I was one of those guys for a little while, so I understand. I just not anymore, but but things have changed a little bit. So I think like I was definitely one of those guys that definitely had a chip on my shoulder. And while like, being nice and cordial, but when you're kind of in a place that you don't want to be, or you're not happy, or you're not having a great time, it gets hard when you're doing the same thing every day and you're around the same people every day to kind of be that friendly, happy guy. And I think that things have changed now, because that was touring back in like 2008, 2009 when gas was over $4 a gallon, and inflation wasn't what it was. So it was so much more expensive. And I think it was just way tougher to be on the road back then. And now I think deathcore bands are, for the most part, I don't know so much about like entry level or beginning deathcore bands, but people are doing a little bit better. They're making a little bit more money. There's a better program out there. And I think, not to excuse myself for being like an asshole on the road or whatever, but it's already too hard. And yeah, I don't know, being pleasurable, being somebody that you can, I don't know, have fun with and be like open and happy with it makes it so much better. And that's what I said with the Thyre guys. It was, if I would have joined any band, I would have joined that band. Like those guys are like my brothers forever. Marshy, Sean, Lee, even Jesse did the like latest tour I did with them on drums, but Kevy is like one of my boys. We talk about weightlifting and shit all the time, but yeah, I mean, I love those guys so much. Even CJ, like after I did my stints with them and CJ was back in the band, I would travel, you know, if they weren't coming to Vegas, I would travel to California just to go hang out with them. And me and CJ ended up hanging out a lot of the time. So yeah.
It's cool to hear that, because as you said, I cannot even imagine how stressed I would have. Like, I know you had experience. I know you had like a name in the scene and stuff like that. It's not like if you would come out of nowhere. I'm sure a lot of people were actually happy and surprised to see you on the freaking stage with them, you know, like I'm sure there was like a lot of people who for them it was kind of a crossover thing happening, like, oh my god, the art is sick, I love, you know, Nick and stuff like that. So I'm sure you had a lot of amazing, but I'm trying to put myself in your place and just like, you're about to go on a stage and it's the first time and there's like 4,000, like I'm just trying to imagine, and you have to perform, and these people are not there to see like a local band, they're there to see freaking Die Artist Murder. Like that's the show, like people are waiting for that. So I'm trying to just like imagine that. It's insane.
Basically I was you know, playing this first show to 4,000 people, and it was just so nerve-wracking because I'm like, am I gonna remember the songs? Am I gonna like do good enough? Like, are the fans gonna love me? Are they gonna hate me? Whatever. And we started this kind of, I don't know, like a routine for every show where we would do a shot to kind of loosen up the nerves a little bit and get off and go on stage and kind of be relaxed and be happy and have a good time. And it ended up becoming, I don't want to say like full blown alcoholism, but by the end of the second tour, we were crushing like 2 bottles of Jameson a night and like just really getting after it. I mean, in the best way, you know, like having a good time, not kind of just being pissed drunk, but like, you know, partying, having a blast. There was a little bit of awkwardness because, you know, like you're performing something for the first time. Like, of course you might stumble here and there. But what was really kind of like the hardest part about that tour was also like one of the best parts of the tour was, you know, it was Parkway Drive and they were awesome and great dudes, but they had a monstrous backline. And so there were like video comments, like, of course, like, you know, I'm going to troll myself and like look at the video comments after I just performed my first set, you know, to 4,000 people. But basically the space that I had on the stage was so small that I had like less than a foot's width between the front of the kick drum. So like front of the kick drum here, drummer's back this way. Yeah. And then the, I don't know, front like vocal monitor, the front, my monitor in front of the, and so I got big feet. I'm 6'4". And I couldn't even fit my foot fitting straight in between that monitor and the kick drum on most nights of the tour. And so it was like, I was awkward already because I was, you know, not fully comfortable with the songs for the first few shows, not comfortable with the guys in the band, not comfortable with the audience or anything. And here I am standing, being awkward, you know, in front of everybody. But then I can't even move around because I can't even have my foot facing the audience. So I'm kind of turned like at an angle a little bit, can barely move around. And there was like comments that are like, this guy doesn't look comfortable. This guy doesn't move around. And it's like, well,
And
There's your explanation.
For context too, you're a guy that moves around quite a bit on stage. Like typically, like you full body bang and the whole thing. It's not like you're not that tame of a vocalist normally. So you must have felt pretty cooped up in that kind of scenario.
It was rough, and I think like eventually, after about a week of shows with them or whatever, I felt pretty natural and like in my element for sure. But the first few were like extra rough because it was like so little space, and then also I'm awkward, so yeah, that's where that story was going.
I'm sure it was a fit though, because I'm trying to imagine like your voice, like it's very fitting with what Dire was doing. Like we're talking about powerful voices, right? Like I mean, I think CJ's part of like these kinds of like powerful.
Look, we were talking earlier about kind of morphing, kind of adapting vocals to a certain thing. I think you did an incredible job of sounding like CJ, like CJ, like. Because it was a bit different than your typical sound, and yes, like the power is there and all that, but I think the tonality and everything, you nailed that. Which I
different style. Yeah, it was still a different style, but
and you know what? Doing those tours with them actually helped me kind of curate my own vocal style too. So I was able to take away from my time with Art and kind of add it to my own repertoire. But I think that like the way that CJ did vocals was different than the way that I did vocals, and the way that he did vocals was easy for me to adapt to. And so I kind of just did that, tried to sound like their record, which I think fans would appreciate, and I think I did a pretty good job at, like you said.
Absolutely.
But then I also kind of would like mix in my own feel to it too, and kind of, hit the punchlines a little different or add in little ad lib stuff here and there, whatever. But no, it was really fun. I loved touring with them. I don't want to say like I wish I would have joined or anything like that, because I definitely no offense to their new guy, but I definitely like thought it was the best thing for the band when CJ came back. And it was my pleasure to fill in for him when he was taking care of his wife and kid and back home. But where they're at now, that's their thing. And I mean,
well, you weren't looking to tour anyways, right? Like that just wasn't the.
Another band would have asked, and maybe you would have said like, I'm not sure. You probably said yes, and a big part of that was just like you were okay, let's do it. That's kind of
like I said earlier, several other deathcore bands, like big name deathcore bands, asked me to sing for them after my time with Art. And I mean, some people might say it's like subjective, but I would say it's objective. At the time, Art was the biggest band in deathcore.
Oh, for sure.
If I didn't want to sing for Art, I wouldn't wanted to sing for anybody else.
I mean,
no one else was doing those crowds and those kinds of tours. And if you were about doing music to big crowds, that was the gig.
It was kind of crazy because, like, from memory, what happened was, and I know I keep bringing that back, but like when unfortunately Mitch Locker passed away, that core really kind of, everything, if things were changing, people were changing their sound and stuff like that. But when Art freaking dropped Ring of Darkness, I do fully remember, like, it gave a second life type thing. Like everybody was talking about it, and it was basically kickstarted the new sound of deathcore almost. I would say, like, it was the beginning of the second era of deathcore. It was I remember listening to that and being like, that's scary. Like, what is that? Like the freaking when it starts and everything. By the way, that's the first song I wanted to know how you sounded and stuff, and it was directly on Ring of Darkness. And dude, that song to me, like, you could show Ring of Darkness to someone who don't know deathcore and be like, that's kind of the aura of deathcore almost. You would be like, oh shit, okay. So
I agree with you 100%. I think that was definitely it, like, gave the second life into deathcore, because I think with Mitch Lucker passing, it killed it. It's so funny too, because I listened to Hate as a fan, completely separate. Like we had played a show with those guys, we barely met them, but I wasn't like, these are my friends or anything like that. Like I just listened to that album because I liked it.
Mhm.
And at the time I was not touring anymore. Molotov had already, gone on hiatus, and I was back in school and I was working a full-time job, and I was doing so many guest vocals, like features for bands, where I would do.
I remember the time.
I would do like 2 or 3 a week. I'm not kidding you. Like people were hitting me up all the time, and I was like not making a lot of money. I was in school. I needed the money. So I was like, if you want to pay me for this, I will do it. And I would listen to that Hate album like in my car on the way from either work or school, wherever I was coming from, and going to the studio to like warm up my voice. And I always thought, man, this band's so sick. If this band ever needed a singer, I would sing for them. And then years down the road, Marshy hits me up and he's like, hey, do you want to sing for us? I'm like, yes.
That's probably helped you know a little bit of the songs, at least from that.
Relationship. Made it much easier. Yes.
Do you remember how stoked and excited you were to first time performing Ring of Darkness, for example? I'm just curious if you remember that precise moment or not.
I wouldn't say Reign of Darkness, because I struggled like a little bit with the timing of that song. So I wouldn't say I was never excited to play that. Like if they asked me to sing for them again, I'd be like, okay, Reign of Darkness, hell yeah, like that's going to be awesome.
Okay.
Because I'm comfortable with it now. But there was a little timing issue, so I was actually kind of anxious to perform that song.
Okay.
But Pure Restraint of Hate, I could do that with my eyes closed, like blindfolded on stage, whatever you want to say. Like I could sing you that song like a cappella without the instruments, because I listened to that song so many times and there was no any issues with that. So I was so excited just to give it that one,
exactly.
I was so excited for that. But
it's a great song vocally, but it's a good live song too, I feel
exactly.
Like,
super fun, lots of energy. But yeah, that album, I may screw up some of the titles, but Shadow of Eternal Sin was my favorite Die Artist Murder song too, and they played that song every night, and it was just so fun to rip through that every night. There's a lot of good ones on there. We played a lot of that album like when I toured with them. The second tour I did with them, we did a couple headlining shows in Russia. And we even brought out like Whore to a Chainsaw and
still one of my favorite.
I think Infinite Death and Whore to a Chainsaw. So yeah, it was fun getting to do those.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the fans were crazy about it too, right? A lot of diehard fans, like including me, I personally love Infinite and the early material and Infinite Dead and all that stuff. Like, and to be fair, that first vocalist was insane too, like with those high pitched kind of crazy, just like insane vocals. It was one of my questions. I was like, were you performing that at any point? So that's, that's awesome. I'm also curious to know, not to talk too much about that, but it's very interesting. I'm just curious, like, do you remember how the guys in Die Hard felt after a couple of shows? Like, were they like conversation, like, dude, like, do you remember how they felt about it on their side?
I think they were playing a little coy when on the first tour that we did, because they didn't want to like pressure me into singing for them. But I can't remember if it was like a week or two into the first tour, Marshy was like, no pressure, but I have to ask, do you want to sing for the band? And I can't remember if he even said it to me like face to face. I think he might have like emailed me one night before bed or something like that. I can't remember. It was very like as polite as he could possibly be about it.
Okay.
And the rest of the band too, they were kind of trying to feel me out and see like, is this guy insane? Is he cool? Could he be in the band? Like,
what happens if we piss this guy off? Let's test him.
Right. And so like, I think, they were very professional about it. And I mean, everything that Dayar did was very professional, and I have nothing but good things to say about them. I know there's some contentiousness around, the CJ stuff and all that. But I think that if I had to choose sides, obviously it would be with my friends. And I think that they're all great human beings. And I think that they made the best decision that they could for themselves. So it's a tough one, but yeah, they were very polite about asking me to sing for them.
I can see that, and again, like not not to talk about that whole situation because I don't really know a lot of stuff about that, but like I just want to say, like, it's always from an outside perspective. You never really know what's going on inside a band for years and all those situations, right? Like every time we hear stuff, it's always it's just like, oh, this, and you're like, oh my god. But like, you know, it's as you said, touring and stuff like that. It's like it's not an easy life and tons of stuff can happen. But I still want to commend the, you know, like as I said earlier, when they dropped Ring of Darkness, they always kept freaking going. I feel like for a while they almost like kind of carried that core like on their shoulders. It feels like that. So
I would even say just like the extreme music scene, like their tours and their like social media presence and everything that they did was kind of like it created the new model for metal, I would say, in general.
Yeah, no, really, it was it was people outside of deathcore would know that I love deathcore and show me like Reign of Darkness. Hey, did you see that? I was like, yeah, of course I saw that. So it was, it was huge. Yeah.
I think there'd be, because look, we've been talking about Die Hard for a minute. I want to switch gears.
Okay.
But I think it does tie into it does tie into Insurrection, because we're talking Die Hard, hate. Sure.
Yeah.
A big part of that. Let's be real. Will Putney, right?
Yeah. Oh,
and you can hear in the sound of that album that's a very hands-on Will Putney record, like for sure, right? So
absolutely.
I mean, I'd love to tie that into you working with Will on Insurrection and how that whole experience was. And then obviously I want to get into the new stuff as well, because now so many years down the line, you guys decided to work with him again. So I'd love to maybe touch on Will and recording with them and how it was then maybe and into the new stuff.
I mean, I could go on and on for hours about, you know, our time with Will and our history with Will. And I think him and I clicked very well. We had a love, you know, for a lot of the same bands. Like we both were huge Thrice fans. We both loved Gojira. We clicked right away in the studio because we already had so much like common understanding through music of each other. And, you know, our even kind of like morals and principles and stuff like that. Like we were very similar. We just clicked very easy. So with The Harbinger, there was no vocal production. There was no pre-production. There was not a lot of like hands-on looking through the lyrics of the songs or like figuring out vocal patterns or like, should you do this and should you do that? It was just like, go do what you want to do. But with Will, it was still the Machine shop at the time. Machine was in and out of the shop, and Will, we were really like one of his first like bigger bands that he did, and he also did the mixing and mastering for. And he was super hands-on. You know, we would go over like lyrics, we would work on concepts, he was so great to work with. He really pulled out like the best of me. If I did a line kind of like not perfect, I would have to go back and do it perfect. And so he really demanded like this level of perfection that I think a lot of people won't even demand of themselves. And so I'm very much a perfectionist in a lot of that sense and super tough on myself. But in the moment, if you track out a line and then you're like, it's okay, like it's passable, a lot of people will just like let it stick. And for him, it was like, no, go back.
Sometimes you just don't know.
Yeah.
And he probably knew, I know you can
do better. Yeah, absolutely. So he was great at really bringing out the best in me. It's hard to say, you know, speak for, you know, guitars and drums and other stuff, but I think he's a guitar player, so I would assume that he would demand even like a higher level of perfection out of the guitarist, out of the drums. So
must be intimidating as a guitar player to record with.
Exactly. And I think it was even tougher for us than coming back all these years later, because that was the last album that we did, and we recorded that in 2011. Yeah. And then these new songs that we recorded, we actually recorded them in 2021, at the end of 2021. And so it's been a little while since we actually tracked them to the release point for a lot of different reasons. But it was 10 years later. And we were all nervous about being up to like his professional standard, because since 2011 he just kind of kept going up and up and up. And we just kind of didn't, we didn't do anything. If anything, we might have gone down a little bit because we weren't, I mean, for me, at least I got to tour with Die Hard, and I got to kind of stick around and kind of hone my craft a little bit.
But you didn't do a month of touring to get to Jersey this time around. So
no. And so it was tough because we didn't practice, but I did a lot of pre-production work on vocals before going into the studio, and was drilling myself as hard as I could to just be in good shape, because I knew what it was like with Harbinger to be out of shape going into the studio. And while we were in the studio, we were only with him for 2 weeks, and the first week basically I wasn't doing any vocals, but I was in the vocal booth every day practicing. I was in the gym working out, like I was doing everything I could to just make sure I was like tip top ready to go. But it was like basically like the first day we got in there, it was like, see the new house, check everything, check out the studio, check all the stuff out, and right,
because you guys hadn't been to his place yet.
No, his new studio completely, and his
studio
setup
looks
now
awesome.
is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so sick. It's such a perfect place to go and record. But yeah, it was like we didn't miss a beat. It was basically like we were in the studio in 2011, and then like it was like time warp to 2021, and we were just right back on the same page. It was like all the same inside jokes that we had from when we were in the studio in 2011, and yeah, it was.
I'm guessing he was happy. I'm sure in his. I know he produced. It's insane the amount of album. Like I'm making video. I think I told you, but I make like videos about the MySpace era and bands like that. His name is, and by the way, I'm gonna have to make one about Molotov. So I cannot name the amount of people who said it's insane that it's not done yet on your channel. I'm like, I know there's a lot of stuff to cover, but what I wanted to say is just like, his name, the amount of album he was on, like I was shocked the amount of material he did, like of great stuff that I was like, of course it's him once again, of course it's him. So I'm sure
the album that sounds fucking awesome is a Will Putney prod.
It's always, you can hear it, you know what I mean? Like it's always just like so freaking well produced. But I'm sure from his perspective, it's always cool to, he worked with a lot of people, but to see you guys again, I'm sure he was like, dude, I'm the one who do that, because for him, like he was still the one who your return, if you will, like he was the person. So I'm sure from his perspective it was awesome too. I'm sure it was great for him.
Yeah, I think it was like one of those things where he heard like we were coming back, he was like, yeah, I wouldn't let anybody else do your record, So he was like, yeah, you guys have to for it. You guys have to come to me. But yeah, no, I think it's like he's basically at the point in his career now where everything is kind of just like a passion project. He's been on so many records that I don't think he does what he wants. He doesn't have to take the work. He picks and chooses. And for him to even like want to work with us again, considering like, because we were very professional in the studio, but we're also like as a band we were kind of a mess, and so it's just like it was awesome that he did want to work with us, and it was awesome that he gave us the amount of love that he did, because it really shows through in the music. I think his touch is you can't miss it.
But there's a level of I would say in the new song, there's a level of maturity too. Not to say that it wasn't back in the days. Like I said, I feel like it aged very, very well in my opinion. But like when I heard the song, I was like, dude, it's dark. Maybe mature is not the right term, but it's hard to explain. But it felt like a logical kind of just like of a step maybe. And with the videos too, you guys really, maybe we can talk about that. But like they're incredible, like movie like videos, which to me just shines like a cooler light even on the songs, I think.
Yeah, I think it's okay to say mature. It's not like we're like 80-year-old grandmas doing porn or something like that. Like mature is like a positive word. It's not negative. Yeah. So I think that's good. But I mean, it's a huge compliment. I think we wanted to keep our sound, but we wanted to show progress, and that's, I guess, is maturity. The music videos were a part of the reason, like a large part of the reason why things got delayed as much as they did. But we ended up getting like the final mixes for the new songs in like Q2 of 2022. And when we got the mixes, we were like, okay, we were a little behind on this, but we wanted to find someone to do like a good set of music videos for us. And it took us a while to find the right person. So we like had the finished songs and we didn't know who we were going to go with to do the music videos. And then when we found somebody, we found Dylan at Versa Studios or Versa Films. Mm-hmm. He corrected me on that the last time I posted about it, but thank you. So we found him, and then he was obviously busy, so we had to wait a little while for him to actually start on the project. And then that's
a whole ass fucking. I've dabbled in a lot of video. Yeah, the production on that is clearly not a 2-day thing, like in terms of just prepping it, without even considering the shoot.
There was delay, and then the shoot happened, and then we waited a long time on visual effects, and the guy that he had hired to do visual effects kind of just kept like passing the buck and being like, it's not ready yet, it's not. And then eventually he just got to a point where he was like, we need to get this done. These guys are waiting for this finished product and they still don't have it. And he was like, I need a timeline. And the guy was basically like, I can't give you one. And then he had to fire there was like 3 people working on it ish or so. He had to fire everybody. And then so he explored options for a while to like hire somebody externally to come back and do the visual effects. And they couldn't find somebody that could do it within like a healthy time frame for like a healthy amount of money, because so much money had already been invested into it. So he was like, I can't pay you this much. And they were like, I don't have the time. So it was kind of like just this insurmountable project that couldn't get done for the amount of money or the amount of time. And so then Dylan eventually was like, I'm going to have to go through and reshoot all of this stuff practically. And it's almost a year later now from the initial filming. And so we finally got like the finished music videos around a year ago. And then it took a little while for us to like, okay, now we have to release this stuff, so now we need like a release plan. So it was just kind of like delay after delay after delay after delay, but the music videos came out great. Like, couldn't be happier with how good they look. And he
reshot a bunch of stuff for
he
like,
reshot
like
a bunch of stuff.
Holy
yes
shit.
Can't imagine even how mad he must have been. You know what I mean? Like, you're working on that, you're waiting, and you're like, and he already worked on it. You know what I mean? It's not like because he was lazy, or it's not even his fault, but he has to like freaking reshoot. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's okay. If I could show you guys, like, it's mostly for the second video from Mortis Imperium, but like the amount of stuff that it is like, it's not small, but it's like, for the time delay, I can imagine how furious he was. Like, we're pretty easygoing, and we're like, we trust you to get it done and take care of it. And he was very like open with communication, talked to us through the whole thing. It was never like a shady thing where he, was, trying to rob us of money or anything. Like, completely understandable situation. It just kind of sucked that it happened to us. Yeah. But yeah, he had just hired this guy on full time as an employee for his company, and was paying him as a full-time employee, and then had to fire this guy because he basically like took money and didn't achieve the product. So,
but it's his name. So then,
and so it's tied to him. Yes. But they look great. They came out awesome. I have no complaints. I would use Dylan again, and I would definitely recommend using Dylan at Versa Studios.
Maybe just not the other guy. That was
he's gone. I'm pretty sure he's gone. So
no, but for real, like, my first thought, and I think me and Dom, we even talked about it when we saw that, but like, it's movie like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it's top.
Fucking badass. We don't get many videos of that nature, especially in like deathcore. Like, maybe like bigger, kind of wider metal, but in deathcore specifically, there are very few videos that kind of stand out, like the trio you guys did.
I think it's because of the cost involved, and Molotov really right now is just me, Robbie, and Jake, and we all at the time had very good jobs. We all had expendable income. We were all doing very well. And so it was like, if we're going to come back, we're not going to come back with like some budget music videos. We were going to come back with some really quality stuff that we've been wanting to do for a while. We've wanted to have this kind of narrative driven kind of horror feel music video, but just never really had the money to do it. And now it was like, we don't need the money from a label. We just spend our own money. And we spent our own money and got awesome product out of it. So
yeah,
I'm curious.
but there's a cost, definitely. It was kind of one of my first thought. I was like, okay, they went all out, you know.
Yeah, we spent some change on it, but it was worth it in the end. I think you know, we got something that I think holds up to or kind of elevates the legacy that was Molotov, because it's like, if you're going to bring back essentially a dead band, like a legacy band, you can't do it half-assed. And I think that there has been a lot of bands that have kind of had a resurgence or a revival where they didn't really do their former, you know, their legacy justice, and it kind of just tarnishes that. And we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to tarnish whatever legacy we held in our fans' eyes or hearts or minds or whatever. And we wanted to come back with force. So we invested a lot of time, a lot of money. Yeah, it required a lot of patience because we're sitting on these songs and we're
Can't
like,
even imagine, dude.
man, we want to
here-
release these so bad, but you know, we're just sitting on them. We think they're awesome, but we hope everyone else likes them. And now they're finally out. We have some more to reveal this year.
Hell yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, I'm glad we did what we did, because Putney was not cheap either.
Yeah.
And I
Nope.
think I can't imagine, I'm sure since, you know, the past 4 years, I'm sure his tickets probably gone up a little bit. And I think he even gave us like a homie discount too. So it still wasn't cheap, but I wouldn't change a thing. I'm so happy with everything that we've accomplished with this new iteration, for sure.
Of the mindset, by the way.
Yeah.
I think it's the right mindset to have. Sorry, dumb, but it's just.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious if there were other kind of, I mean, maybe altogether just how the quote unquote reunion kind of happened, but I'm kind of curious because you're talking about you guys had certain non-negotiables, like from what it seems in terms of how you guys wanted to portray the band if you guys were to come it back. Were there other discussions in terms of like certain things that had to be done a certain way for you guys to actually put music back out?
I think that was just really not wanting to half-ass it, but yeah, big man Blastoise for sure, Robbie. But I think that we battled back and forth for a long time with trying to revive the band, and Molotov really went on hiatus in 2012. In 2014, we kind of rekindled things. Like, me and Robbie got back together, and we actually got the old Harbinger lineup back together.
Yeah.
And we did a tour in Australia. We played a show at Chain Reaction in Anaheim, and then it kind of just like fell apart again. Like, it went on like indefinite hiatus after that. Like, nobody said like we weren't going to do anything else after that, but we just didn't do anything else after that. And we were, you know, we had every intention of writing music and like playing shows, and it just never happened. And we had people reaching out left and right, like trying to book us, trying to get us, you know, into the studio, trying to like give us record deals, trying to do all kinds of stuff. And I was like, look, like we're just not there. And I can't remember what year it was.
Still never put out the rest in peace post though, so can't blame the people too much.
No, and I think it had to have been maybe like 2017-ish, maybe 2018-ish. I had already done the tours that I was doing with IR, and we were working on the Insurrection lineup coming back, and I basically like, through like blood, sweat, and tears, got like relationships mended and brought everyone back together to work together again on it. And then it just kind of fell apart again. And so it was like, got the Harbinger lineup, fell apart. Got the Insurrection lineup back together, fell apart.
Was the remaster an imagining from that time, or was that down the line?
That was down the line. That was just, you know, something before going into the studio with Putney. Okay. It was like it was like the same conversation. So it was same line as this new music. It was just like a little bit before. We were planning on going into the studio, but he did the remaster beforehand. But anyways, it was just tough. Like, it's hard to get people to like be friends. It's hard to get people to communicate well together. It's hard to get people to work well together. And we finally got it like squared away where it was just me, Robbie, and Jake. And we were like, so be it. If it just has to be the three of us, like, let's write some stuff and go do it. But as far as members go and like playing shows and doing stuff like that in the future, we will see. We're working on some stuff right now that is really exciting for me.
Yeah, I'm sure you get a lot of DMs and messages of people like, when are you coming to that place? Where are you going? Because like what's going to happen is if you release like videos amazing as what you did, the music production, like the instant thought for most people is just like, oh, okay, so they're, you know, like they're touring, like it's just going to be this instant connection of just like, okay, they're touring for sure. You know what I mean? Like with the image and stuff like that. So I'm sure you guys are receiving like tons of just like, are you going to do that tour? Are you going to come here and stuff like that? Do you get a lot of that?
We do. Touring is kind of like a tough subject because we're really not a band. Like we don't have touring equipment. We don't have a touring vehicle. It's just me, Robbie, and Jake. So we would need a guitar player and a bass player. So there's a lot of things that like make us not a band as much as we are a band. And I think it just, we have a lot to figure out, but I hope that we can get it figured out this year. And I hope that we can, I don't know if it's shows or festivals or tours or what it is, but I'm hoping that we can get it figured out this year. I'm hopeful. I'm trying to
what I can tell you
but
is the very first show, at the very least, the very first show you would do coming back, that place would go insane. Like, I'm just going to say that, like, just with the comments, with the reaction of people saying you're back and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, just a little video I did recently with just like bands that released music recently. And you guys were in that, like tons of comments, like just, oh yeah, Molotov Solution. I would be extremely surprised if it wouldn't do well when you guys are, you know, doing it, you know, if you can do it. So at least there's that. I'm seeing
a lot of, we'll call it legacy band for whatever it is, you know, for what it's worth. There's so many chiller opportunities for that kind of band in recent years, when it comes to just being able to do one-off reunion shows or festival lineups or all these things that don't have to include, you know, obviously I don't expect you guys to be doing 9 months of touring a year anymore, right? Right. So obviously that wouldn't be the cadence, but that doesn't, I feel like, especially for a legacy band, that just doesn't have to be the way anymore. And I feel like 10 years ago would have been a different conversation. Like if you wanted to be a band, if Molotov wanted to continue being a band in 2014, it probably would have had to come with full-time touring, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think there would be no other way around it. Things hadn't really shifted towards this like more digital age that we're in now, where everything is social media based. But I don't know. Touring is just not my favorite thing to do. It's fun, you know, when Art calls you up and they're like, hey, do you want to come on vacation in Europe for 40 days? And I'm like, hell yeah. Like, what else am I got going on? But it's different when you're like, dude, maybe not the last year, but like there was a 13-month time period where Molotov was on tour for 12 months of the 13 months. And so there was 30 days basically over that year that we were off at home.
Yeah, I'm seeing like 2011, 2012 was like a massive run, like nonstop. I was looking at the tours. I was like,
that's not even healthy. It's just like, you know, it's not even like, it makes no sense basically. So.
Yeah, we were like just beating feet and touring nonstop and just no breaks. And I think that could have been what contributed to us, like, you know, breaking up and splitting apart. But I think also too.
I think it's all Montreal's fault.
I'm very well say it could be because we got broken into, I think, like twice in Montreal. But no, we love Montreal. It was always great when we were up there, except for, you know, getting broken into. But it just it was rough in a sense, and it was strange because like when Insurrection came out, the album actually leaked like 2 months before it was supposed to come out, and it didn't do what it was supposed to do for the band like on paper. But then like after we split, we really felt the effects of how much Insurrection was doing for the band, and it sucks that we didn't get to feel it like while we were touring, you know, like we didn't never had like a full tour cycle on that album, so it definitely hurt.
That's another disadvantage as opposed to right now, like you're so connected with social media. I feel like you see more the impact of things now, right? Like when you release it, you have numbers instantly, analytic, everything. But back in the days, it was more of a, like we talked to bands that did very well, but didn't feel it. You know, a good example of that was like for a while, and Hell followed with. I don't know if you remember these guys, like they were awesome. And they released one of the coolest deathcore albums ever. But when we talked with them, it was just like, well, we didn't feel really like that. Like we felt like it did pretty bad actually. So it's very special to, you know,
we had first week sales numbers on Lambgoat, and that was kind of all. That was kind of it.
And a review from
iTunes numbers, if your label was nice enough to give them to you, and that's kind of it.
And you've got Metal Sucks shitting on deathcore on your album, so that was pretty much.
I don't know, maybe my ear isn't to the ground so much about this, but like with album leaks and stuff like that too, it was destroying bands back then.
Oh yeah.
And your first week sales were so bad, whereas like now I feel like people aren't like chomping at the bit to try to get leaks before albums come out, because they just come out on streaming. People don't even announce when they're coming out anymore. They just drop them, you know. So
it was download culture. That's really what it came down to. So for a few years, kind of like specifically in those years, like that transition between everyone pirating music and Spotify. It was like that the industry hadn't adapted to the fact that first week sales were just like obliterated because everyone was just downloading music and already had it the month before, and you know, and
things were changing basically at that time. It was a transition of, you know, what we know right now as streaming. So I don't think people were even realizing that it would be heard. Like, not to defend all these guys, but it was just like, oh, they want to listen to music, they do it. Like it wasn't even
guilty as charged for what it's worth. But
I think at some point we grew up with freaking LimeWire, to be fair. So like
exactly.
we downloaded a lot of virus, but also a lot of music. So they you know.
And I think if you could have somehow like used our first week downloads and apply that somehow into first week sales, like it would have changed things. But
for sure,
because that's what we do now, right? Like we do take into account like Spotify numbers and stuff like that. That's basically where the world went eventually. But like I said, it's like for those few years, it was just kind of.
And you had sorry.
Well, no, Well, go ahead. I was going to change into one last thing afterwards.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Because like I feel also, and this is important, we had less option. Like as a band, you really had less options in terms of like doing well for yourself. It was your music, ticket sales, that was pretty much it. Nowadays, any bands right now has the possibility to maybe have a moment, to maybe do really well on socials, maybe release like a funny video or something that just like takes off, and next thing you know, they're headlining a freaking tour because of that freaking, you know what I mean? Like the things have really changed.
Selling merch
sometimes
online,
exactly. You can do your own thing. We see a lot of independent bands right now doing extremely well. Sometimes it blows my mind to see stuff like, you know, Shadow of freaking Intent doing their stuff by themselves or whatever. So there are more options now, which is something sometimes people maybe younger, and I'm going to sound old, don't realize because they see it and they're like, yeah, they could have done this. No, it was different times. You needed a label. You needed to, like a band back in the days, not on a label. It wasn't good for you. You needed to like sign with a freaking label if you wanted to do something. That was the culture. You kind of had to say yes. Everybody was signing things away and just like, I need to do it type thing, and I need to play. So things really have changed now. You see bands just have more visibility than their own labels. Sometimes it's crazy. So
you get the what the fuck is up, Denny's?
And
your band blows up, you know. You get that one moment and it changes everything.
And then next thing you know, they're doing some dates with Blink-182, man.
It's insane.
It's insane.
It's crazy.
You think everything is possible now. So that's just, I just wanted to add context, because back then I remember even me personally, every band 15, 16 who wanted to make it, the only mindset you could have is we're gonna have to tour and get signed. That was it. Like there was no, that's your road. That's what you do. That's pretty much it, you know? So it was different.
I'm sure that was kind of, I assume, a conversation coming back. Obviously, you guys are doing things independent, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, you know, that sort of stuff probably allows you guys to be able to come back and not, you know, be tied to so many things and do it on your own accord.
Yes and no, because it's, you know, we come from a different like era of being in a band. And so things nowadays are completely different, and we still don't really know how to navigate it. And we're kind of learning as we go and trying to pick things up as we go. But thankfully we have friends in bands, and we have friends in new bands, and we have younger friends that can kind of help us, you know, pivot and adjust and kind of correct our business model as we go. So it's a new thing for us, but also we are not as old as like some of the bands were like when we were touring that are still touring. So we were like a little bit younger, but now we're, you know, getting close to 40. So
let's not talk about it. Yeah,
it's pretty old at this point, but you know, not
hey,
as
look,
old as I
we're
guess
all
it could have
doing.
been.
Hey, we're cool, right? We're doing a podcast on Twitch. You know, we're cool.
Yeah, but things have changed, dude. Like really, like what you look at someone like freaking Ricky Hoover coming back, and they're killing it with freaking Off Sulfur. And Ricky, I don't know his exact age, but he must be around 37. I know he's older than me, so he's around 37, maybe 38. Like nowadays, it's completely different, especially in metal. It's this weird thing where you can almost do that your entire. Look at Cannibal Corpse and all those freaking bands, like just still touring and killing it and headlining shows. So like it's weird because when I remember when we were 15, 16, the conversation, you felt old at like 24 or something. Like, weirdly, like everybody felt, I remember feeling like, oh my God, I'm too old now to, even if I wanted to, which was insane. I wasn't too old at all, but like I feel like this has changed as well right now in terms of
that's just you though. 24-year-olds today feel the same way. Guaranteed. That's just perspective.
maybe, but like we see a lot of those bands coming back, you know, and it's just cool to, you know, it's just cool to see. So that was my point.
Absolutely. Ricky, I mean, it's cool to see Ricky come back and do his thing. It was, you know, weird to see him step away because he was such a big part of the scene.
Yeah.
My old roommate, Chase,
he's
plays guitar for them.
I was gonna say the Vegas connection.
Yeah. So it was interesting because like in my living room was like Ricky, who I had been friends with since we were touring together, but it was like them forming their band in the living room of my house. It was so cool.
That's insane.
That's awesome.
You know, seeing Ricky coming back too was a big deal. Like I remember for me, like 2012 for me basically was just like a hit in the face because like I was like super fan of like Mitch Lucker and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So like during that year I was like devastated, and then Suffocate was one of my favorite bands, if I'm honest with you, like ever. Even I still like that music. So like Ricky leaving.
Can confirm.
Yeah, I keep bringing it up all the freaking time. You know, like all the time. People are just like, can you like they have like 2-3 albums. I keep bringing them up, but and then Ricky leaving, I was just like, you know, oh my God. So when, and he kept for years, by the way, saying like people would ask, he would do a lot of Q&As and he would be like, do you guys give up on that? I'm done with doing music. I'm done. I fully, and every single time I was like, okay, you know what I mean? And then bang, came back and even sounds different and 50 times his size, you know, but he weighed too. So I was just like, what is happening? That's most of the time when I'm answering to his stories, that's when I'm just telling him, dude, like you're a beast. I don't know what to tell you. Like what is happening? You know, every time he's just like, hey, thanks. But to see people coming back is really wholesome. Including you guys, obviously. So it's been interesting. Who would have guessed, right?
I didn't look. I gave up on Molotov Solution music a long time ago. So
did I.
When we saw the remaster come out, and then at the same time you guys hinted new music, I was like, fuck yeah. But then truth be told, I gave up again. Because then four or so years went by with not even another social media post or press release or anything. So when you guys started teasing the new stuff, I was like, oh, finally.
It was tough. The waiting period was like very tough for us too. And I think like it would have been awesome if we could have just kind of piggybacked off of that initial Insurrection remaster. And but it just it's tough. Being a band is tough.
Plus, on top of that, dude, I can't even imagine at your place, because during those years, that was the comeback. You would see Lorna, Thriving, like all those bands coming back, and you had to sit on music during that time. That's what, to give context, like the years you mentioned were the year when it kind of just like
deathcore
the biggest
up
years
again.
Yeah. And you had to like you're just like
sit on the sideline.
Yeah. I'm hoping that, you know, things are still good for us and we didn't miss our window too much. But
I don't think that really changed much. Deathcore, if for what it's worth, deathcore is eaten right now. So
dude,
I don't see a world where, you know, it's not like, you know, oh, deathcore went bad again and no one's paying attention anymore. Like deathcore is, if anything, as big as it's ever been right now, and
I think so too.
You guys are just gonna fit right in there. So
bands re-embracing their roots, you know, like we're talking a lot about Whitechapel, kind of going back to that like original vibe, stuff like right now, deathcore, like earlier we were talking about, like for a while deathcore wasn't cool or something. Nowadays it's all people want to do in metal almost, you know, like that's the big, if there was a time that you definitely didn't miss it.
We've got a deathcore podcast, for crying out loud. I'm pinching myself for you know, like 18-year-old me would have been like, nah, dude, not in 2025, brother. Hanging up. But hey, here we are. So
it's cool. The places it'll take you to. It's great. I mean, all my friends and all the people that I've met, places that I've been, stuff that I've done, like, so the home that deathcore built kind of a thing, you know. So your guys' podcast, like everything, it'll take you places. It's great.
Yeah, it's incredible. Truly.
Hell yeah, man. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this with us. I had a blast, man. This was
me too.
This is a really cool conversation. So I don't know if you've got anything that you'd like to plug, anything that you'd want to tell the people before we let you go. Anything,
doesn't have to be with music as well, like anything you've got going on or whatever that you want to,
where we can find you, music, all that stuff.
I don't have a ton of stuff to plug, but I will say that we do have a new song coming out this month. So that'll be my bomb. I'm not going to say when it's coming or how it's coming, but it's coming. And I will also add to that it is probably it is the most brutal song that we recorded when we were with Putney. So it's an ass beater. It, you know, it makes sense to kind of be announcing it on the Brutality podcast, but it's an ass beater. Prepare your holes. Thanks for watching. Thanks for anybody that watched this and gave us your time.
Dude, and by the way,
door dashing some diapers right away.
Yes. It was so awesome. And you've got some cool stories. And the thing is, I feel like you had way more stories. So if you're open, I think it would be cool in the future, especially with you guys still releasing stuff and whatever. Like that would be cool to have you back, you know, and sometimes in the future to just like talk about that stuff. So
no, absolutely. I would love to be back. This was awesome. I know Robbie wants to come on here and hang out with you guys too. So you could work something out with him at some point. That would be cool too. But yeah, I'm definitely. You guys got my Instagram and stuff on there.
I told Jacob too, because I'm a huge Shadow of the Colossus fan. So
and Jake is a super big, like,
I know, like
nerd in like the most positive way, and he has like a way deeper knowledge and understanding of a lot of things than I do. So he would be awesome to have on this podcast too.
I'd be super down, and I know them obviously.
We're gonna collect the Infinity Stones here. We'll get them all.
I'd be looking forward to it. I would love to watch those. So appreciate you guys for having us on. Appreciate you guys for just doing what you do in general, like watching your guys TikToks or reels pop up, like brighten my day, seeing you guys making this content and doing the Lord's work for everyone.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah.
We love
Pleasure-
doing it
pleasure
for
is
real.
ours, yeah.
It's like it's a gift, honestly. Like the 15-year-old me knowing like what I'm doing right now, like talking to you, talking to Ivan, close conversation, I would have been like, what is like, you know, what is happening?
Yeah.
So it's amazing, truly. It's super cool.
Yeah. It's very
Very
cool.
grateful. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, man. We'll keep in touch, and
Definitely.
yeah, I won't be sleeping until the single comes out. So put it out soon.
All right.
Waiting
Prepare
for
your
that.
holes. I promise it's an ass beater.
Hell yeah.
All right, man. Well, have a great night, my man.
Yep.
All right, guys. Thanks
Take care,
again. You
dude.
too. Bye
All
bye.
right, thank you.